Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld, and this program is about the expansion of our consciousness. And that's why I am so happy to have with me here my first YouTube shoot, Allison Carmen. She wrote a beautiful book called The Gift of Maybe. Things can be uncertain in the world, and it's okay.
Right. Uncertainty actually could be our friend if we choose to look at it differently.
Most people are so caught up in trying to control their life.
Okay. Well, I begin the book by describing my personal experience. I always say that I was addicted to certainty, and I needed to know what was going to happen next in my life. And if I didn't know, I projected things were going to be bad or things weren't going to work out in my life. And I think a lot of people do that. I think there are some people who have faith and they could get up in the morning and just be okay with whatever happens. But most of us write stories about what needs to happen for us to be okay. I need to have $50,000 in the bank when at a certain age, or I need to have this job, or my child needs to go to this type of college. And we write these stories to make ourselves feel better, because without the stories, we feel groundless, because we worry that if we don't know, things aren't going to work out.
So we write the good stories, but we also are always fearing the bad will happen. And
right.
So we're torn between these two poles of like, I hope it's good, but it might be bad.
Right. But the story stems from the fact that we need that ground. We need to feel that certainty, so then we'll feel okay. And intellectually we know that if something doesn't happen in our life, things could change. But emotionally we fail to grasp that idea.
So what do I do if I want this like program to go well? I mean, I'm putting that out there. I want, other things to go well for me. How do I work with my own addiction to wanting to come out the way I want it to come out?
Well, there's nothing wrong with a goal. I mean, people have goals in life. They want to accomplish things. That's not where people get tripped up. Where they get tripped up is their attachment of how it has to happen. Like maybe this show will go okay. I mean, there's a chance, but it doesn't mean that if it does or it doesn't mean that you're not going to be successful in life. And I think that's what happens. We attach to this one thought. My child needs to go to this college to be successful. If you hook into that thought and things happen differently and your child doesn't get into the college that you thought they were going to get into, then you're going to project that things aren't going to work out. But the only reason we write the story to begin with is because we're worried that we're not okay.
And that everything isn't going to be okay.
Right.
And you saying everything is okay?
Maybe it is. And that's the thing. If what maybe does, it opens us up to a place where we can look at all that's possible. Because if you're just fixated on one thing happening in your life and that doesn't happen, you're going to feel worried, you're going to feel stressed, you're going to feel like things are not working out. And for me, that's how I saw my life. I was worried that I wasn't okay. I was worried that things weren't going to work out, so I wrote this story. And my story was that I was going to get a job, I was going to become a lawyer, and I was going to get a job at a very large law firm, and I was going to marry this great guy, and I was going to make a lot of money, and everything was going to work out. And the day I started that job, I actually believed, I've arrived. This story that I wrote actually happened, actually came true.
Well, isn't that great when the story you wrote happened?
Well, but then the second day, my office mate came into the office and said, Allison, did you hear they're firing half the first years? And I was a first year at the time, so all of a sudden my head started to spin. Well, what happens if they fire me? How am I going to pay my rent? Where are my parents going to think? So that's where the anxiety just kept growing and growing. And even though they didn't fire me, then I started to worry, what if they don't like my memo? What if there's going to be a terrorist attack in New York City?
So you were always worried about something going wrong?
All the time.
And then when you shifted to maybe, how did that change this worry thing?
Well, it changed everything, because when you embrace this idea of maybe, you're not going to be thinking in this just one linear way. You're going to open up to many things, because if you think about it, maybe I'm still okay. Maybe something else will happen. Again, intellectually we know this, but emotionally we don't. And when you engage us in the idea of maybe, they align. And when you align emotionally and intellectually, you're going to become very present and very peaceful and very open to all things that could happen in your life.
Help me do that. Help me. No, how would I get to a place
Lay down on the couch and then I'll help you.
How would I get to a certain place of maybe, of like, oh, it's okay if this doesn't work out or that doesn't work out?
Well, it depends what your thought is.
Right.
Like, the first thing you do is you write down your biggest fear.
Okay.
And whatever that fear is your fear, I'm going to do all these videos at YouTube and it's not going to work out and things are going to be terrible and everything. You know, I mean, you look
that's
at
one story.
and then you ask yourself, am I absolutely certain that fear is true? No, most of the time we're not absolutely certain. that the thing we fear is going to be game over, or it's going to be the end of
Right.
our existence, or our ability to be successful in life. So after you gain that perspective, well, I'm not certain, what else is possible. And then you sit down and you write these maybe statements.
Right.
Maybe what's happening is good. Maybe it'll get better. Maybe I'm still okay. Maybe I just have to wait and see. Maybe I need to pause. So what it does, it reminds you that more things are possible in that moment than that one fear. It's almost like you could put a one fear in a little test tube, or you could throw it in the ocean. And when you throw it in the ocean, you see so much more as possible.
Well, why don't you talk about your story about getting into law school? I really like that story. It's a great story, how you really wanted to get into one law school and you didn't tell us that.
Well, for me, because I was writing these stories about how my life needed to be,
Yeah.
the story was I was going to go to this particular law school. I was going to go to NYU,
Yeah.
and I was going to get a job at a very large firm, and everything was going to be great. And I didn't get into that school. But because I was so fixated that it had to be that way, because I was trying to make myself feel better, when it didn't happen, instead of just saying, well, maybe something else will happen, maybe I didn't know about maybe. I became so fixated that I let all my other acceptances lapse, because it didn't happen the way I needed it to happen, because I needed to go to this school to be successful. And I think a lot of us do that. We actually believe that in order for everything to be okay, we need things to happen a certain way.
Right.
But when you engage in maybe, you're just more relaxed, because you realize, well, that thing didn't happen, but maybe something else will. And it sounds so simple.
But when you didn't get into that law school, you got very depressed.
Very depressed.
And how did you come upon this philosophy, taking your history of addicted to certainty? How did you discover this maybe stuff?
Well, when I was working at that law firm, I stopped sleeping. I had a tremendous amount of anxiety because I could not control every outcome. And my immune system started to fail me. And then I went to all these doctors, and I kept asking, please help me, there's something wrong with me. And they took all this blood work, and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you, you're totally fine. And they tried to give me this pill for my anxiety, and even that made me anxious. So I just kept spinning and spinning until one day I heard this beautiful Taoist story.
Oh, right. You can tell that story. That's a kind of a good story.
And I went to my Taoist teacher. He was a Qigong teacher, and I said to him, I can't stand it. I thought this would happen, and then this didn't happen, and this would happen, and he just slowed me down. I said, Allison, I'm going to share with you a story. And he shared with me the story about this farmer.
Yeah.
And this farmer had a horse, and the horse ran away. And the neighbor came by and said, you have the worst luck. And the
Right.
farmer's like, maybe.
Right.
And the next day, the horse came back with 5 mares. And the neighbor came by and said, you have the best luck. And the farmer's like, maybe. And the next day, the farmer's son, story's not over, the farmer's son.
It goes on and on, I know.
But then the farmer's...
something happens and they
Right.
say it's bad, and then something else happens and it's good. So what did you
But
get?
for me, I was so worried my entire life that the horse was going to run away that it never occurred to me that it could come back. And all of a sudden, when I heard that story, I actually felt a pop in my chest. And all of a sudden, I was filled with all this hope. And I went home, and I had just started a consulting business. I'd left the law, and I started to do business consulting. But I had all these worries. I didn't have enough clients. I wasn't going to make enough money. And I threw every worry against this idea of maybe. And no matter what I threw against maybe, nothing felt so bad. Because I realized that life always has an opening. We forget that because we're so afraid we're not okay. But when we allow maybe into our lives, we constantly recognize and we realize that there's more to life at every minute, every moment. And hope is always with us until our last breath. So that's what maybe did for me. And I wasn't going to share it with anybody. This was something that was helping me personally. And then I would speak to all these clients, and I would help them with their finances, their marketing, growing their businesses. And no matter what I did, if they were afraid of uncertainty, I couldn't help them. And then one day I started to talk to them about this idea of maybe, and everything shifted for them as well.
It did. And hope is what we really need to bring into our lives, but not the attachment to hope, is it?
Right. Well, it's such an interesting place to start, because a lot of people, a lot of teachers, a lot of people in our society say that hope is an attachment that causes suffering. And for me, I'm not going to get out of bed in the morning without hope. It was true, because every business, every romance, everything you do with your child, it all has hope wrapped into it.
Hope is an attachment to like a good outcome. I mean, isn't hope a part of certainty? Like, I'm hoping this will happen.
Well, you could say that, but for me, when I get up in the morning, yes, I could say I hope I have a good day, or I hope my child succeeds. But with this idea of maybe, you could hold it so much looser. To me, it's not the hope that causes suffering. It's our attachment to how things happen. If we could be flexible within uncertainty, if we could be flexible in everything in our life, then hope is a beautiful thing to hold.
Okay, let me integrate that. So it's great to have hope. I hope this is all great, and I'm not attached to
how it happens.
Uh-huh.
Because, like, we were talking about parenting earlier.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to parent and not have hopes
Right.
for your child.
Right. If you don't have hope for your child, you
Right.
know, what kind of parent are you?
But that becomes very tricky because, parenting, you want to be able to do it with an open heart, and you want to be able to wake up in the morning and feel hopeful about things. And things happen with our children.
Right.
They could become ill, they could be stressed, they could be bullied. How do we show up for that?
How do you show up for that? With this philosophy?
With this idea of maybe.
Yeah,
because
how-
I recognize that even in those moments where your child is suffering, where they feel that things aren't going to change for them, if they're doing poorly in school, if they're getting bullied, with this idea of maybe, you always recognize that there are more possibilities in life. Life doesn't come down to this one moment. Because with your child, because you want them to be well and you want everything to work out, you could get really uptight and you can get really down and you could have a lot of anxiety. But with maybe, you remember, okay, I see this is happening in this moment, but things can still change.
Oh, okay, I'm finally getting what you're saying after 3 long interviews, that maybe is used as a tool to keep us disconnected from some projection into the future. So, like, something's happening now, but maybe something else is going to happen the next moment.
Right.
If I don't have the maybe, then I would project, oh, this is how the way it's going to go.
Because
And
it's happening because my child
Right.
is suffering today, they'll never have friends tomorrow.
Right.
Because my child didn't get into this school today, they're never going to be successful. That's what we do because we're so afraid they're not okay. We're afraid we're not okay, and then we're afraid they're not
And the thing
okay.
about life, it's full of change. I mean, every moment is different than the next moment. And if we get attached to a story that, oh, look what happened now, it's always going to happen, then we're actually lost touch with our present moment.
Right, we suffer terribly, and we also, it's not even just the present, we're actually limiting ourselves in the future. We're limiting ourselves, we're limiting our children, we're limiting everything about who we are. Because these projections, they cause us suffering in the moment, suffering in the future, and then we're not really open. When we start to embrace maybe, we start to see uncertainty as our friend.
I don't get that.
Because if you think about it, if you want your life to change,
Yes.
it has to happen in the unknown.
Okay.
Right? So the unknown basically is where all the potential lies. It's where all your possibilities lie.
Okay.
So in that moment, if you're worried, like we were talking about children, if you're worried about your child, that you're projecting that things might not work out in the future, but that future is where things will change for them. And if you could all be open enough and find the courage to embrace it, then you will. I have to say, in my life, I always find that things always change, usually for the better. If I'm embracing this idea of maybe, there's more possibility that we will all find our way.
And maybe it'll even be better than we thought it could be.
Right, well, that's my favorite of them all. Maybe
What?
everything is okay, and maybe things will even be better than we thought.
Right. I mean, you could say maybe they'd be worse, but I think we already live in so much fear. We've already imagined the worst.
We're already in that place. And, maybe, what I also love about maybe, it doesn't say life doesn't have hardships. There are all these theories out there that if you have this positive thought, life will be great.
Yeah, talk about that positive.
Well, I really struggled my own life with positive thinking.
Yeah.
Because I was so afraid of uncertainty that when something negative would happen, I would be battling between it's good, it's bad, it's good, it's bad.
Oh, so if something negative would happen, you'd say...
I couldn't hold the positive thought. I was so afraid.
Uh-huh.
But once that, you wake, like I have a client that will come to me and say, I'm going to start this business. And in 1 month, I'm going to have $30,000 of income and I'm going to have 20 clients. At the end of the month, he has $5,000 of income and 2 clients. Now, if he's afraid of uncertainty, he's going to say, well, it didn't work out. Things didn't work out the way I planned. But if you're embracing this idea of maybe, you recognize, well, maybe my business is growing. Maybe I need to do something else. It's this constant opening again and again. But if you're just holding on to that positive thought and all these negative things are happening, you're not going to be able to hold it. And you're going to give up on your dreams too soon. I see a lot of people do that.
That's good.
But with maybe, there's more space. There's more space to wake up and realize that things will keep changing.
Right. And I think it's also powerful in... we get very stuck. Even let's say we're successful, but we're in this formula, and it becomes routine, and we don't expand beyond a bigger possibility. So it's a way of moving us into even greater possibility, even though things are going well.
Right.
But people get stuck there in that comfort zone.
Right, we get into our habits, we get
Right.
into our patterns, and we're right, we don't live our best life, we don't live our most expansive life. And then if something does happen that's challenging, what do? Where's the tool? Where's the tool for that? And it was interesting, there was this fellow who actually read my book. He had just lost his wife.
Right.
And he came up to me and he's like, Allison, I hated your book. I didn't enjoy it. Well, he's like, I just lost my wife and life's never going to get better. And I understood that he was going through a grieving process. But it was interesting, 2 years later, he now has a girlfriend. And he came up to me and he said, what's so interesting is that maybe really helped me. Because eventually I was able to say, what's possible? What's still possible in my life? And what's interesting, because what maybe says, it doesn't say that he's happier with this girlfriend than he was with his wife. It allows you to stand in the moment and say, what's still possible for me? Even if you liked what happened yesterday better, it's like squeezing out whatever juice is left in life. That's what maybe allows us to do. So at any time, at any place, we get to see all that's possible. Even if it's a difficult situation. Sometimes in the most difficult situation, sometimes you have this little moment, this little breath, this little interaction with somebody. And if you're always open in that space of maybe, you're going to let that in.
But does it stop us from appreciating what we do have, the moments? Let's say things are going really well. If I had the thought, well, maybe this isn't going to last, then I won't necessarily take in the moment.
Well, that's what maybe it's not about that.
Okay.
But what it is, like I said, it's like you're throwing in an ocean, you realize all things are possible. And so if you're standing in this place of hope, when you're in this moment and you're enjoying it, you're going to be extremely present.
Okay. Why will I be experiencing?
Because you're in this expansive place
Yeah.
where you recognize all things that are possible. And you know when you're having a pleasant moment.
Right, I do.
See, what's interesting about maybe is that we tend to use it more when we're struggling.
Right.
We're struggling in this place where we're in this maybe not mode. And it just reminds us that there's so much that could happen in every given moment. But when you're happy in that moment, you're present, you're just in that zone. And you're not going to give that up for anything. And you're not going to start. And if you start to have these negative thoughts, it won't last. This moment won't last. If you start to go to that place, well, then you use maybe as a tool. But if you're just here, present.
Well, I know it. I know you for what, 30-something
Yes.
years. I know it.
And we both look too young to know each other
Maybe
so
we do.
long.
I don't know. But I know it's helped your life, and I know you work with a lot of people. I think that story of that homeless person that you tell, where you talk to him, right? You're looking at me like a blanket.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Is
No,
that
no.
a good story?
No, it's a great story. It's a wonderful story.
Yeah,
Well, there was this fellow, and he lived on the streets
Yes.
of Manhattan, and
Things didn't look good for him. I mean, he's on the streets.
He's on the streets, and so we
That's not-
started to have this relationship where I would try to help him every day.
Yeah.
And what was so interesting about it is I would go up to him and we would talk about his artwork, and he would say, "I'll bring my artwork tomorrow." And I said, "Okay, because what if you bring your artwork? I'll purchase your artwork." And of course, he'd show up the next day at the exact time we were supposed to meet, and there would be no artwork. So for a long time, we went back and forth with meeting each other. And whatever he said he was going to do, he never followed up on.
Right.
And after a while, I realized that I was trying to create a maybe for him. Like he should want to give me his resume. He should want to get a job because
you were projecting a story onto
right.
him.
I know what he should want. And after a
Right.
while, I realized, I was just trying to put, like you said, I was trying to project what I thought he should want.
Right.
And one day, he was walking, and I was driving my car, and I stopped, and I gave him $1, and he said, "Oh, I was just going to get a cup of coffee, and I thought maybe someone would give me money." And I laughed, and I thought to myself, well, was that it? Was that what it was all about? He just wanted money, and that was his maybe, that was his hope for his life. And for a long time, I thought that was all there was between us. And then a couple of months later, I ran into him. He had just got out of the hospital, and he had pneumonia. And he looked at me, and he said, "Allison, every time you stopped to speak to me, you made me feel like maybe my life could be better." And I looked at him and I said, "You made me feel the same way." So what was really happening is that just caring and loving and being kind gave him this opening of hope that maybe life could change. It's just not me, it was the doctors, anybody who ever showed him some love and kindness, it opened him up. Because that's really, when you do that and you're giving and you're kind, you open something up for somebody else. And so it was a really interesting experience that we both had together.
So maybe is also a way of being kind to ourselves, in a sense, because if we get stuck in a kind of depressed, negative way of thinking, if we have this awakening of maybe it doesn't always have to be this way.
But that's a beautiful one. Maybe it doesn't always have to be this way. I mean, you've lived a whole life, and you have all these possible habits and negative patterns. How do you get out of it? And this maybe casts a little doubt on the doubt, or a little doubt on this negative place, and it shines a little bit of light in your life. And sometimes it changes everything. Maybe it doesn't have to be this way any longer. I mean, that's a beautiful platform to start something new in your life.
Yes. Well, let's get back to the idea of children, and your children, and working, this philosophy with, you want your life to go well for your children. You want them to be happy, and yet they have their life to experience.
Well, the first thing is I work with parents.
Oh.
And one of the most interesting things is there's an exercise in chapter 1 of the book. And it's what we talked about before. It's like you write your biggest fear down, and then you ask yourself, are you absolutely certain? That exercise actually came to me when I was having an experience with my own daughter. She was having stomach problems,
Right.
and I took her to this doctor, and the doctor turned around to me and said, I think your daughter might have celiac disease. Now, I work with everybody. I'm hope and possibility, and all of a sudden, I felt like someone lost it. I felt like someone punched me in the stomach and pulled the rug from under me. And there was no maybe. I was nervous. I was stressed. I was worried. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I had been going at it.
This book.
I should have. Actually, I did. Actually, I read it. And I just couldn't clear my head. I just could not clear my head. And that's what I did. I wrote my worst fear down. And my worst fear was my daughter has celiac disease.
I don't even know what that is.
And it's a genetic autoimmune type disease. And that was my biggest fear. And I wrote, my daughter has celiac disease, and things are bad. And things will never be okay.
That's your worst fear.
And remember, intellectually, I knew that a lot of people live with celiac disease, but it didn't matter because emotionally, I went to that place, game over, things are not okay. And they weren't okay because they weren't happening the way I thought they would.
Right.
And so I wrote my worst.
Game was over.
Game was over. And then I asked myself, are you absolutely certain that this thought is true? And when I recognized that I wasn't absolutely certain, the next step was, what else is there? And I wrote maybe statements down for about a half hour. And it started, maybe she doesn't have celiac disease. Maybe she does, and things will still be okay. Maybe I just need to wait. And the more I wrote these maybe statements down, I started to feel more of an ease in my heart and more of an opening to recognize, well, just because this is happening doesn't mean that things can't change, doesn't mean they can't work out, doesn't mean we won't have a different type of experience. And after a half hour, I became very present. I became to a place where I was able to just be and sit in the unknown and recognize that over time the answer will come and maybe things won't work out as bad as I was projecting. And so for those 10 days, I was so present with my daughter. I was so open. I changed her diet a little bit, but we just enjoyed ourselves. And it ended up she didn't have it. But that was such a profound experience for me because it allowed me to approach parenting with such an open mind. So now when something happens with my child, I had a situation where my daughter had a concussion. You have a situation where your child is not doing well in school. I could always engage in this idea of maybe and realize, okay, this is what's happening in the moment, but maybe things will change. Maybe they'll get better. Or maybe it's okay. That's the most profound parenting statement. Maybe everything is okay. Because we're writing these stories about our children that they need to be a certain way. But the minute you recognize maybe everything's okay, you're just able to be present with them and enjoy the moment. We're so projecting all the time about the future of our children that we're not really present for them.
So maybe if she did have this thing, and that, let's say the worst thing, things happen, right?
Things happen.
But we still project a future about what's happening that makes us depressed about the future. And by using maybe, something happens, but we don't have to be attached to the future of it being that way. I think that's what you're saying.
Yes, and also we could become very present because there are hardships in life and we don't know what's going to happen. But when we allow ourselves to lessen the projection and become more present and have more hope, we are going to at least be here now. And the moment, there's always something. There's always, and like we talked about before, even if it's just this little tiny moment, a little laugh between you and your child, even if the situation is difficult, that's what life's about. And what also maybe it is that, so I was using it for parenting, but then my child would come home and let's say she tried out for a play and she didn't make it. I'm never going to try out for a play again. That's it, game over. And with this idea of maybe, I've helped my children recognize that just because life is not working out the way that they had planned, what they had hoped, it doesn't mean that it won't work out. It doesn't mean you're not going to make the basketball team next time. It doesn't mean you're not going to go and get a part the next time. But with maybe, they're going to try out again, and they're going to keep moving forward. And then you also look at world events. I mean, I cannot turn to my children and say, oh, there'll never be another terrorist attack. Or there'll never be another, Ebola won't spread to the United States. But what I can let them know is life has maybe. And just because something happened today doesn't mean it's not going to get better. and maybe the world will get better, or maybe we'll find a way for there to be peace, or maybe there's hope for certain things to happen. So they're able to look at life and see it for what it is, but at the same time be hopeful. And I think in their life, as they go out to work and they have difficulties and they have hardships, with this idea of maybe they're going to get up every day and they're going to try, and they're going to keep trying to expand themselves and hopefully try to make the world a better place.
Well, no, I really appreciate you sharing your story, and I'm happy that this book has been so successful. But what I got out of this, the most important thing for me is the present moment. Like, if we don't have maybe, we get attached to a long future, a projected future of things always being a certain way because it's this way now.
Right.
And I think the most important thing you said to me is that when we have this idea of maybe, we come present and we are here and we can have that beautiful moment with each other or with our child or partner, and then it's like it changes everything because we're no longer telling a story. You, Allison Carmen, have snapped a smile.
I'm listening to you.
You snapped us out of a story. I don't have to tell a story about how it's always going to be this way.
Right.
I think that's really powerful.
Right, and just
for
with the
people.
idea of maybe, there's hope and possibility. And it sounds so simple.
It does.
But when you go out into your life and you're in pain and you're suffering because things
on.
aren't working out exactly as you planned, this little word makes all the difference, because the first time you show up and you feel free and you feel at ease, it really is an amazing way to live. And as you embrace it, this simple term, life will change. And you will find more hope and possibility in your life and more opportunity because you're available for it.
You've done an incredible thing here. I mean, because you are spreading sort of a Zen type of awareness. When I say Zen, the presence of mind awareness to parents, to the people you relate to that don't have to meditate all the time. All they have to do is bring in awareness to what's possible, and their life can change.
Right, because life has maybe.
And you have maybe.
Oh, thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to have been here with Allison Carmen. This is a great book from beginning to end. The gift of maybe, finding hope and possibility in uncertain times. Will your next book be maybe not? I'm kidding. You want to say anything? Final words, wisdom?
Well, just I hope that everybody watching gives this a try. And like I said, it's so simple, but it's so profound. If you can't read my book, go on my website, AllisonCarmen.com. You could also find me on the Huffington Post and Psychology Today. And I hope everybody's able to open up a little bit more and embrace this beautiful idea.
And you know what? It's so simple.
But it works. It works. It allows you to be present and hopeful at the same time. And that's what we want. Yes.
That's a new reality.
That is.
This is Alan Steinfeld for New Realities. If you want to reach me, go to my website, newrealities.com, or email me at newrealities@earthlink.net.